Hello, my name is Julian Atkins and I am the Net Zero Programme Director for the Church of England's Net Zero Programme. The purpose of this presentation is to outline the shape of the programme over the course of the next triennium and what our work programme and the packages of support will look like over the next 3 years. But first, I just want to reflect on why this work is important for the Church. Fundamentally, caring for creation is rooted in the fifth mark of mission, but it also addresses the other marks of mission too. It is part of us proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ as a beacon of hope in the face of an uncertain future. It is part of us demonstrating a Christian response to the threats facing the whole of creation and about who we are as Christians. Taking steps to reduce our own footprint is part of us loving our neighbours as ourselves, wherever they are in the world, and it is part of us working towards a fairer and more just global society. We know that we're facing a massive challenge and there is still so much to do. This thermometer, published recently by Climate Action Tracker, shows we are a long way off reaching the goal of a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in global mean temperatures by the end of the century as set by the Paris Agreement. That is why General Synod committed the Church to the ambition of being net zero by 2030, why we produced our route map to net zero in 2022, and then established the Net Zero programme, which began its work in 2023. And we've made real progress over the first 3 years of that programme and have seen a genuine groundswell of action right across the Church of England. All dioceses now have net zero strategies in place and the capacity to roll these out, supporting parishes to act locally. We are now capturing annual energy data for more than 2/3 of our churches through our energy footprint tool, and this informs how and where we prioritise action. Over a third of our churches, 5,871, are registered under a Roche's Eco Church initiative, with over 3,000 churches achieving at least a bronze award. We funded energy audits for 500 of our highest emitting churches and helped 615 others to achieve some quick wins. We have a network of 65 demonstrator churches around the country developing and implementing exemplar net zero projects, and communities are getting behind local net zero projects for their churches. Our Give to Go Green parish match funding campaign, which we've piloted in 8 dioceses so far, has supported 127 churches who've raised between them almost £918,000 towards projects totalling almost £2.5 million. We're helping 14 cathedrals implement a range of net zero solutions for their estates, from air source heat pumps to solar PV schemes, infrared heating and better building management systems. And we've helped 140 schools to produce heat decarbonisation plans, with 33 schools going on to secure government funding to implement carbon reduction projects worth almost £12 million. And we're supporting our diocese to undertake retrofit works to approximately 50 clergy houses as part of the programme's work. Change is happening at every level. Churches are taking the initiative, dioceses are embedding support, and behaviour change is growing across our communities. But it's important to remember where we are. Once again, in recent weeks, we have seen the devastation caused by extreme weather events made worse by climate change, both around the world and here at home. This is St Thomas's Church in Jamaica, which was destroyed by Hurricane Melissa a few weeks ago. And we know our churches here in England are having to deal with more extreme weather events too. So it's important that we keep the momentum going. The approach we are taking builds on what we know works well, embedding good practice and strengthening what's already been established. We've built greater flexibility into our work streams to meet communities and buildings where they are on their own net zero journeys and to enable progress towards net zero to take place in stages. This next triennium brings an investment of £40 million and the programme will now run to 2034. The 2030 ambition was always about galvanising action, but the extension to 2034 recognises the real-world challenges the Church is facing more broadly and aligns with what we have learnt about where dioceses and parishes are on the road to net zero. We're not losing sight of our original ambition. Some initiatives may be phased later in the programme, but our long-term direction and national aims remain unchanged. And within these financial parameters, we'll work efficiently and direct funding to where it can have the greatest impact, prioritising buildings that contribute most to carbon emission reductions, while ensuring all buildings are supported on the journey to make their contribution. Our net zero commitment was an act of faith, a target that has driven extraordinary progress that wouldn't have been made otherwise. While we recognise that not every building will reach net zero by 2030, we will continue to make significant measurable progress towards that goal. When we began, there were hardly any dedicated net zero officers around the country. Now we have a strong national network of skilled practitioners across dioceses and cathedrals, and also nationally, sharing expertise and learning. The Net Zero programme is a national effort that depends on progress being made in every part of the Church of England. We want to continue to hold a national perspective rather than a diocesan one, but we also need to work collaboratively with you as you know your context best. We will only succeed if we move forward together to innovate and find creative solutions towards our shared outcomes. I'd now like to hand over to Shannon Carr-Shand, our Programme Manager, to take you through our 2026 to 28 work programme in more detail.
My name is Shannon Carr-Shand and I'm the Programme Manager on the National Net Zero Carbon Programme, and I'm going to explain how the work programme for 2026 to 28 will be structured. Firstly, I'd like to look at how this work fits into the longer term work across the programme's funding from 2023 right through to 2034. At a high level, the work of the programme in 2023 to 2025 has focused on these 4 areas: building net zero carbon capacity and expertise, and here the work at the diocese is core to the Net Zero Carbon Programme, which is why the Capacity Building Grant was the first grant stream launched in 2023 and is again the first grant stream to be launched from the 2026 to 2028 work programme. We then move on to engagement, where we are looking to engage the Church of England community on net zero carbon and approaches to decarbonisation. The third of these high-level streams is understanding our data. Here, we've been really getting our arms around and improving the data to understand where our carbon emissions come from and use this to inform strategic decision making. Lastly, we've been piloting methods to deliver funding which supports good quality decarbonisation projects on the ground. These 4 themes of the work programme will continue going forward, and the work programme for 2026 to 28 is built on this approach and informed by what we have already learned. Looking ahead across this triennia and the triennia that follows, we will continue to work in these core areas, but we will deepen and broaden our work in each of them. I want to point out here that all of the 2026 to 28 grant funds will be launched and managed via the new grant management system that is being introduced across the NCIs. These grant funds will therefore mainly be launched in Q2 2026. Detailed information about each of these grant funds will be shared at the point of launch, and we will share with dioceses the details of these grant funds ahead of making any of that information public to parishes. The Net Zero Carbon Work Programme for 2026 to 2028 has been structured as a series of individual work streams, as explained in this diagram. There are the 4 foundational work streams which form the basis on which all of the work of the programme is built. We then have 6 work streams which describe how we will approach supporting decarbonisation across each of the core building types which are in scope of the programme. Finally, wrapped around all of these work streams is work stream 11, Data, Evaluation and Learning. This work stream covers the carbon accountancy to understand the overall carbon emissions of the Church of England, where they come from, and the work to interrogate this data for strategic decision making. As the overall carbon footprint figure is a lag measure, we will also be reporting on a set of proxy indicators alongside this. These will measure the progress on projects being delivered within the individual work streams. Across the programme, we will also be undertaking detailed evaluation of decarbonisation projects delivered and the grant support provided. The learnings from this will inform guidance, helping parishes to make better decisions about their decarbonisation journeys based on the learnings of those that have gone before. Each of these work streams has a detailed workstream strategy, which has been signed off by the Net Zero Carbon Programme Board, and underpinning that, a full project proposal which details how we will deliver the ambitions of these work streams. We've shared the pack of workstream strategies with you alongside these webinars. To find out more about the programme of work within each of these work streams, I invite you to watch the individual webinars presented by the relevant workstream lead. They will talk you through what has been achieved in their workstream in the years 2023 to 25, and how, building on this, we will take the work programme forward in 2026 to 2028. Finally, I'd like to note that the project proposals for delivery of the work streams now highlighted in grey here will be approved by the Net Zero Carbon Programme Board in February 2026. We will therefore share a second set of webinars with you at that point, explaining the detail of these work streams. The Engaging and Embedding workstream focuses inward within the Church of England community to support engagement with the twin crises of climate change and nature breakdown, and help individuals navigate these through providing tools and knowledge on how to respond to this and to address climate change mitigation. The outward-facing part of this work will be delivered through the workstream Being Christians for Creation, which will focus on partnerships, sharing the work of the programme externally, and being prophetic leaders for positive transformation in our society. First, I want to look at what the programme has achieved in this workstream in 2023 to 25. The programme has delivered a broad communication strategy, establishing the core message and tone for the Net Zero Carbon Programme. This has led to a suite of engaging videos, case studies, toolkits, which are enabling impactful engagement with our audiences. All of this work has been underpinned by the development of a strong and positive working relationship with diocesan comms teams. Secondly, we have supported A Rocha through a partnership grant to develop and broaden the reach of Eco-Church and Eco-Diocese. Over a third of our churches, 5,871, are now registered under A Rocha's Eco-Church initiative. This is a 45% increase from the end of 2022, with over 3,000 churches already having achieved at least a bronze award. We've also established and distributed a £6.5 million net zero carbon capacity building grant fund to help dioceses make progress towards carbon reduction. This is the foundational aspect of the programme's work. When we began, there were no dedicated net zero carbon officers. Now we have a strong national network of skilled practitioners across dioceses and cathedrals sharing expertise in learning. Dioceses tell us that without this funding, the progress and momentum we are seeing on net zero carbon would not have been possible. Lastly, this has enabled the Diocesan Net Zero Carbon Network to be established. This is an active and engaged network of net zero carbon officers and other individuals working on net zero carbon across the diocese. To support this, we've held an annual conference in 2024 and 2025, the 2025 conference being a joint conference with the DEO network. Our diocesan colleagues report that this is a really effective network and important to their work, which can often be as the lone champion on net zero carbon in their diocese. We have learnt the following from this work in this triennium. We recognise the need for repetition. Key messages and content needs to be deliberately repeated for key audiences, and some repeated on an annual cycle. There is a need for multiple communications channels. Despite all of the great work of the programme and diocese on comms to date, not all of the content is reaching all of the parts of the church we would like it to. Lastly, developing resources and toolkits nationally, but working through dioceses has been very effective, and diocesan comms teams have become strong partners in our work here. There is also a need to more strongly make the link from climate change to mission, both within the NCIs and across the Church of England community. This is a nuanced piece of communications requiring tailoring for different audiences and will be a long-term and multifaceted engagement. This learning has underpinned the strategic aims of this workstream for the next triennium. I have presented on this slide the 5 strategic aims, and I will talk through each of them in detail to explain how we will deliver the programme of work that will help to support this ambition. Firstly, strategic aim 1, that we want the Church of England's communities to understand how working to protect the environment and reach net zero carbon is core to mission and the wider benefits it will deliver. Within this, we will develop a project with experienced partners to seek to bridge the gap in our understanding of what less engaged groups think, feel and know about climate and nature. This will explore how denominational differences influence attitudes, and from this develop an evidence-based segmentation of the Church of England's community's attitudes to climate change to inform how we connect with them in a way which responds to their values and priorities. To engage and act on net zero carbon, the Church of England communities need to understand how this work is missional. Working closely with the National Church of England Environment Programme, we will develop a suite of resources which explores the theological underpinning of the environmental mission and translates this for different audiences. Moving on to Strategic Aims 2 and 4. We want to inspire and encourage all churches to engage on the environment net zero carbon as mission, and we want all of the Church of England communities to understand the work of the programme and how to access it. To deliver this, we will progress our comm strategy to support and reach our audiences. We will deepen engagement with our audiences and inspire them to take action, whilst continuing to be honest about the challenges in decarbonising. The A Rocha partnership will continue, building on the existing work and encouraging and equipping churches, cathedrals and dioceses through the award survey to progress towards net zero for their buildings and towards managing their land for climate and nature. In 23 to 25, we piloted 2 carbon literacy training offers, one for congregations and the other for diocesan staff. The former is hosted by the Carbon Literacy Project to facilitate wide access and enable sharing with ecumenical partners. Building on these initiatives, the Net Zero Carbon Programme will support further rollout and dissemination. We will also work with colleagues in the NCIs to embed net zero carbon into our existing work with younger audiences and develop and deliver a net zero carbon youth engagement project. Moving on to Strategic Aims 3, we want to support all parts of the Church of England to integrate environment and net zero into the mission, strategy and decision making. In order to deliver this, we will roll out the successor to the Capacity Building Grant Fund for Dioceses, and this grant fund has already been launched. We will continue to support the Net Zero Carbon Network and to facilitate this through regular online network drop-ins, the annual joint Net Zero Carbon DEO conference, and the online knowledge platform and discussion group. We will also look to develop a diocesan land project. The route map to net zero carbon includes a decision point to recommend whether land should be brought into scope of the programme. Whilst it seems clear that this should be brought into scope at some point, the question to answer is when and in what way. Ahead of this, we want to support dioceses, building on the learning from those dioceses who have already engaged with this through the Eco-Diocese Silver Award process. This project will therefore work with dioceses to think about their approach to land. It will co-create guidance and relevant templates to inform development of diocesan land strategies. It will support dioceses in developing strategies based on these resources, initially in a pilot approach, and develop this in such a way that it can form a national picture of diocesan land and therefore support decision-making on scope and potentially future funding through the Net Zero Carbon Programme. I then want to move on to talk about Strategic Aim 5. We want dioceses to be able to support parishes to deliver net zero carbon projects which hit the sweet spot of conservation, low carbon, occupant comfort, being fit for mission and affordability, which would in turn make our buildings more welcoming and affordable to run. In this work, we work through dioceses to support parishes. Therefore, an essential element of ensuring good quality net zero carbon projects are developed and delivered on the ground is ensuring that there are the right skills in the right place and clear and effective net zero guidance and tools available when needed. Building on foundational steps taken in Triennium 23 to 25, for example, the practical path to net zero carbon for churches, the technical fact sheets, and the heating conference, we will develop a suite of tools to address this consistently and on an ongoing basis. In 2026 to 28, this will include a net zero carbon skills assessment and training project. We recognise that the challenge in delivering net zero carbon across our CFE buildings is not only one of capacity and financing, but also requires specific knowledge and skills to determine the appropriate net zero approach for a given context. This needs to balance conservation, usage, and cost and future-proof these decisions, ensuring choices made now are still valid in 20 years. Some of our key audiences already have the required skills and knowledge, but we know this is inconsistent and the skills needed are not currently well understood universally. Existing training could meet the needs of some of these audiences, but is not currently signposted and might require funding. So the initial phase of this project will identify and map these training needs. Later phases will respond to these findings and develop resources and training pathways as appropriate. We will plan and deliver parish and diocesan-facing guidance and best practice, which will be informed by the research undertaken and evaluation of net zero projects already delivered. Lastly, in this area, we will develop self-service parish support tools to support project delivery, particularly aimed at those decarbonisation projects which will be run by volunteers in the parish. This will provide them with online and on-demand training on the management of net zero carbon buildings or heating projects, and also fundraising. And it will be underpinned by a suite of templates which support them in delivering this on the ground. The fundraising workstream is led by Helen Simkis, who is currently on maternity leave. Her maternity cover, Sophie Henstridge-Brown, is joining the programme in November 2025 to take this workstream forward. I'd like to start by looking at what has been achieved in this triennium in the Net Zero Carbon Programme's fundraising workstream. The work started in 2023 with an indicative study from Action Planning Consultancy, highlighting the scale of potential external funds available for decarbonisation projects and making recommendations for how this could be accessed. This report informed the strategy of the workstreams, particularly the plans to increase capacities in dioceses. In 2024, around £3.6 million was leveraged in additional fundraising across dioceses, and that excludes the substantial PSDS funding for schools which was raised. The workstream has also developed guidance, training and support for parishes and diocesan net zero officers. This has included webinars, in-person workshops, conference sessions, drop-ins and web-based resources around fundraising, which can be used by wider colleagues who are supporting fundraising. The Diocesan Fundraising Workshop had over 52 attendees, and there is a further session planned for early in 2026. 4 parish bid writing fundraising webinars were held, and a local authority contact directory was developed for the North West Regional Fundraising Officer, and also a separate directory for the East of England clusters. The fundraising workstream has also piloted a number of individual grant streams, the success of which has informed our work programme for 2026 to 2028. The first of these, known as Give to Go Green, was piloted a match funding grant fund for churches, offering up to £10,000. Churches had 6 weeks to raise funds using digital giving. This was a very successful pilot, and the 127 churches in the 8 pilot dioceses received about £800,000 in match funding, which they leveraged towards a total of £900,000 which they raised externally. Together, this has supported projects totalling nearly £2.5 million and delivering an average carbon reduction of 14% per church. The second grant stream to be piloted was the Regional Fundraising Officer. This was piloted in the Northwest and has been successful and has now been rolled out to all dioceses, and I will talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. The final grant stream piloted was the Parish Networking Fundraising Grant Pilot. This has just been awarded, and the actual work will take place in 2026, so evaluation and learning from this pilot will be shared after this. Across the work of the fundraising workstream, we have learnt a number of things this triennium. First, that leveraging funds for net zero carbon projects is possible, and community fundraising delivers sizable co-benefits for parish, mission, community engagement, volunteer upskilling in project management and fundraising, and the uptake of digital giving. However, diocesan capacity for fundraising on net zero carbon is limited, and increased support will therefore be made available for this through the Regional Fundraising Officer. The scale of external fundraising available is not as readily accessible as originally thought, and it is highly subject to external political factors. Regionally, it is mixed and patchy. However, this is largely untested in this triennium because that capacity for fundraising in dioceses has been limited to date. Lastly, lobbying for improved access to government funding by parts of this church, especially for clergy housing and parishes, can be successful, but it does require persistence and capacity. I want to now move on to talk about the strategic aims of the fundraising workstream for 2026 to 28. The first of these is to raise funds and secure strategic partnerships at a national church level. In order to deliver this, the fundraising team will be soliciting fundings from philanthropists and grant-making organisations for national or regional projects. And to do this, they will work with colleagues in the national giving team and also cathedral and church buildings. This project will first be at a national level, but it may be followed by introductions at regional and diocesan level to philanthropist and grant-making organisations where the opportunity can be better taken forward at this level. We are also introducing a new £400,000 net zero carbon fundraising accelerator fund. This grant fund stream will provide funding to enable fundraising to happen in a range of ways. Firstly, very short-term fundraising consultancy for a parish network, deanery or group of churches, fundraising research or data analysis to inform a significant grant application that can't be funded through a diocese, provision of match funding to projects to unlock really substantial leverage. This is not intended as a main source of grant funding, but to enable access to other funds. The aim of this accelerator fund is to unlock fundraising opportunities that would not otherwise be available without that small injection of fundraising first. It will be primarily used by the regional net zero carbon fundraising officers once in post, and grantees will be signposted or recommended by them. DBEs and cathedrals will be eligible to apply, and while parishes will be eligible, they will not be able to apply directly. Applications will need to be submitted by the relevant regional fundraising officer. This accelerator fund will be launched in Q2 2026, and it will initially be structured through an initial expression of interest step, so applicants can outline proposed fundraising requests and discuss this with the grant manager before they are invited to make full application. That approach is intended to reduce the burden on both NCI and diocesan staff and also enable high-quality applications. Our work on lobbying national and regional government to increase access to and availability of funds will continue in the next triennium. It will include pushing to resolve governance issues particular to faith organisations in accessing funding and the need for clarity around eligibility criteria, engaging national arm's-length bodies that manage grants for national and regional governments and national networks, such as the UK 100 network, and engaging with the energy sector, Ofgem, Great British Energy and utility companies to understand the scope for grants for housing and green energy schemes. Under our third strategic aim, support dioceses to fundraising, the first project is our regional fundraising officers. Here, we have funded 8 regional fundraising officers to work across a cluster of 4 to 6 dioceses each, to bring a strategic approach to fundraising by building relationships with regional and local funders, especially statutory bodies, approaching project development creatively by clustering groups of projects, and working with diocesan colleagues across diocesan boundaries to diversify income streams by presenting church buildings as community assets where being net zero will have a range of positive benefits for local people. The grants for the regional fundraising officers were awarded in September 2025 and are currently being signed off, but the works of these individuals will be carried out in 26 to 28. The regional fundraising officers will be supported by the Net Zero Carbon fundraising team and will share best practice and offer one another peer-to-peer support while working alongside existing fundraising and giving colleagues in their clustered dioceses. Under both this strategic ambition and Ambition 4 to support parishes to fundraise for net zero carbon, we are establishing a community energy project. This project will enable dioceses and parishes to engage and partner with the community energy sector on renewable energy projects which support their decarbonisation plans. There will be a focus on parishes in areas of high deprivation, where the potential increased cost from running an electric heating system may be prohibitive, but additional solar would reduce the cost and make the project feasible. This project will provide a framework, guidance and resources to enable all dioceses and parishes to assess what community energy has to offer and to develop and deliver beneficial projects, including clustered regional projects supported by the Net Zero Carbon regional fundraising officers. It's important to note that community energy is a growth sector and increasingly being backed by Great British Energy, so there are a range of opportunities opening up for potential parish and other Church of England projects. Within this project, a grant stream of £100,000 will be available, which is intended to support 4 £25,000 grants to pilot projects. And these projects will be selected to test a range and variety of community energy models that could potentially be rolled out in future triennia or in other dioceses and parishes. Under our strategic ambition for supporting parishes to fundraise for net zero carbon, we will continue to offer guidance and research. That will include grant-funded research to understand how parish networks can be supported to fundraise more effectively than single parishes, and resourcing best practice fundraising guidance, research, training, and resources. Lastly, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Grace Hardingham, who is the Give to Go Green project manager, to talk about how the national Give to Go Green parish match funding grant will be rolled out in 2026 to 2028.
Hello, I'm Grace and I'm the Give to Go Green project manager. I'm really excited to speak to you about this amazing project that I have a lot of passion about. So, starting in Q2 2026, we have £3.15 million worth of funding to roll out this grant nationally. Net Zero officers will work with their giving advisors, generosity officers, whatever you call them, to find 2 to 3 churches that will really benefit from this project. That's per year, per diocese. Give to Go Green has been a real success in a variety of parish contexts, and I'll give you some statistics on that in a second. Match funding is a real incentive to give, and 97% of churches have got 100% of their funding target. Give to Go Green is about 3 simple things: decarbonising your church building, engaging your community in net zero, looking outside for community engagement, and inspiring generosity, which really links to engaging your community again, but looking up towards fundraising and looking at how you can build on Give to Go Green to expand your projects to decarbonise your church. So I've spoken about inspiring generosity and engaging the community, but what does that actually mean? Here we have an example of Give to Go Green and how that happens, and we have some more statistics that we'll get into at a later date, but I thought I'd give you an example now. So in round 1, the average gift size on an app for a church taking part was around £6.93, and obviously it hiked during Give to Go Green because there's that big match funding incentive. But we've seen that it doesn't reduce to the level that it was before taking part in Give to Go Green. Instead, we're boosting that generosity, and the average gift size is going up to £10.86, which is great. It's 57%. And then we have the average online gift, which has been really inspiring, which was before £15 and 71 pence, going up to £89 and 10 pence, which is a 467% increase. So it's really asking your local congregation, your local community to engage in giving and engage in fundraising to not just boost a project that a church is taking part for Give to Go Green, but for other projects, for the daily life of the congregation, for the daily life of the church, for all the missional work that happens in our churches, which is why I am so passionate about Give to Go Green. And then in round 2, we have a 79% increase in the app and digital giving, and then a 284% in online giving in round 2, before and after. And a quick another one, I hear you say, oh Grace, I actually can't do that because it's a poor church or it's a rural church. Here we have the churches that took part in round 1 and what the breakdown of what IMD is. So their IMD is the index of multiple deprivation. So 1 being the most deprived areas and 10 being the least deprived areas. So you can see that we had a wide range of church contexts taking part, and like I said, all of the churches were really successful in fundraising, because match funding is such an engaging incentive to give. And 60% of our churches were rural, were urban, and 40% of our churches were rural. So again, it's a pretty even split of the church context. So it's kind of now up to you to find the churches that you think will benefit from this the most. We'll have a project ready to fundraise for, and remember that we have 3 years to spread out that funding. So if a church isn't ready now, a church might be ready in a year or 2. Thank you.
I'm Shannon Carshand, Programme Manager on the National Net Zero Carbon Programme. The Decarbonising Churches workstream will be led by Steve Collins, but he's not joining the programme until January 2026. I'd like to start this video by highlighting some of the impacts of the Churches grant stream in 2023 to 2025. Nearly 1,000 environmental action plans have been commissioned for churches, and these are on track to be completed by March 2026. We have also rolled out a 3K grant programme to help churches in the first round of these audits to take initial steps from the audit recommendations. This grant was delayed in launching and so will continue into 2026. In addition, the eligible works covered by the grant have now been extended to also cover consultancy, responding to feedback that this would help more churches to make progress. The Pilot Boiler Replacement Hardship Grant Fund has funded 19 parishes to avoid a failed or failing fossil fuel heating system being replaced for like, and more importantly is delivering warmer, welcoming spaces in these churches where heating has been an ongoing challenge in recent years. 5 parishes in slightly more complicated situations are also in the process of receiving, or have already received, decarbonised heating options appraisals to help them consider the best decarbonising heating option available for them, and to equally avoid being locked into a new fossil fuel solution. The Quick Wins Grant Fund, devolved to dioceses to fund decarbonisation work in parishes, has helped hundreds of churches take small actions and also contributed to larger electrification projects. The numbers of parishes reached here will continue to grow as dioceses reach the end of their grant giving phases in Q1 2026 and collectively update their monitoring reports. When this is completed, we can quantify the cumulative impact of these interventions on the emissions from our churches workstream. Lastly, I want to talk about the Demonstrator Churches grant stream. Although initially delayed, it is now gaining real momentum, and it will therefore continue into 2026 to allow us to reach those dioceses who have not yet been awarded their full quota. However, we're delighted that to date, 61 demonstrator churches have begun work on net zero carbon projects, and now 90% of dioceses have either been awarded a demonstrator church grant or have applications under assessment. So, what have we learned from these pilot grant streams? Well, firstly, good decarbonisation projects deliver a breadth of other benefits. They deliver warmer church, stronger community engagements, and a clearer relevance to the younger people in their congregation. We've also learnt that parishes need longer to develop their decarbonisation approaches and then to develop and deliver the subsequent capital projects. They need to understand what routes to funding may be available before they are willing to invest their very limited resources, both financial and in capacity, in developing decarbonisation projects. Following on from that, we know that our grant fund design needs to be flexible. It has to have flexibility in the type of support offered through the grant fund to meet prioritised parishes where they are. It is difficult to predict nationally or at the diocesan level the pipeline of parish decarbonisation projects and whether the funding need will be at the project development or capital stage. Furthermore, we know that most of our buildings will need to decarbonise in stages, and parishes need funding which can support this phased approach to decarbonisation. Lastly, our grant design needs to continue to have sufficient rigour in grant making so that we make sure we are funding projects which will be successful and that have considered the heritage, the usage of the building and also decarbonisation. But we're really clear that the grant making process does not replicate the faculty process, which is the gatekeeper of whether a project is appropriate for that building given those wider perspectives. Building on these learnings from this triennium, the Decarbonising Churches workstream has 4 key strategic aims. Before I proceed, I'd just like to note that this workstream covers both churches and in-scope church halls. So in the next couple of slides where I say churches, you can understand this to mean both churches and church halls. The first strategic aim is fundamental to the work of this workstream, and it is underpinned by the capacity building grants. But the work in ensuring parish incumbent staff, PCC members and volunteers have access at the right time to high quality guidance and advice that they need to deliver the Net Zero project will be delivered through the engaging and embedding workstream and the data evaluation and research workstream. So please do see the videos explaining these workstreams for more detail about how we will deliver on this priority. The work of the Decarbonising Church workstream is then split into 2 key focuses under Strategic Aim 2 and 3. Support, targeted financial support for the top 20% of highest carbon emitting churches and church halls, and then broader support for the remaining 80% of lower carbon emitting churches and church halls. So, why are we targeting funding towards the top 20% of highest carbon emitting churches and church halls? This is because that top 20% of churches and church halls, when arranged in order of their carbon emissions, are responsible for 55% of emissions from our churches. This means that the majority of our Decarbonising Churches grant support will be targeted to that audience. However, it is important to note that there is not sufficient funding available to support all churches or church halls that would fall into this top 20% category. That would be approximately 3,700 churches and church halls. So, targeting this grant funding in this triennium will also require some pragmatism, and the programme will continue to work with the Coalition of the Willing. That being said, the remaining 80% of churches are still responsible for 40% of emissions from churches, and the programme also wants to help all churches to make some programme on decarbonisation and take them on this journey. We will therefore have a range of support available for these churches, alongside access to some smaller grant funding, which I'll go on to describe on the next slides. Alongside grant funding, which I will describe in the next few slides, we will also be supporting all churches in their decarbonisation journeys in the following way. We will be developing a self-service audit tool. This will be an easy-to-use online self-service church decarbonisation energy audit tool suitable for straightforward decarbonisation options. The tool will allow parishes to enter in key information and be guided through a series of branched questions to propose appropriate decarbonisation approaches for them. It will highlight key areas where further analysis may be required, e.g. to understand the impact of heating changes on heritage objects, and it will also identify where church or church hall context is too complex and the tool is not suitable. We'll also be rolling out the National Technical Advice Service, building on the service that we established to support Stage 1 church demonstrator grants in this triennium and the boiler replacement hardship grants. Access to the National Technical Advisory Service will be made available for DACs to refer complex parish challenges and faculty applications to. This will give good quality independent advice to these parishes, and it will be launched in Q2 2026 alongside the Decarbonising Churches Grant Fund. We'll then roll out the next phase of our subsidised energy audit programme. This will build on the 23 to 2025 energy audit programme, but the eligibility criteria is likely to be changed, and this will be shared in Q2 2026 when the current audit programme has completed. Lastly, we'll also continue the Conservation Survey Grants funding, which was established in Triennium 23 to 25. This funding is managed alongside the existing Conservation Grants Fund, but enables parishes to apply for support with the cost of conservation surveys where the underlying reason is not a conservation need, but to understand the impact of a change to heating approach on the fabric of the building or objects within the building from a conservation perspective. Lastly, if I move on to the 4th strategic aim in this workstream, it's to avoid like-for-like oil, gas, fossil fuel boiler replacements. Here, we will enhance our grant offer to support parishes who have failed or failed heating systems to avoid them being locked into a new fossil fuel heating system for decades to come, and I will describe this as well in the grant funding slides to come. We will also work with our colleagues in the Cathedral and Church Building Department to further develop a boiler replacement policy framework and guidance on how to apply it that we hope will be useful to chancellors and registrars. Before I explain the grant funding, which will be available for parishes across 2026 to 28, I just want to take a moment to highlight what we mean by decarbonisation in church context. Reducing emissions from a church or church hall means reducing its energy use, which also immediately reduces bills, transitioning to an electrified heating system, and switching to a low-carbon tariff. The decarbonisation journey and speed will be different for each church. It depends on how the church is used, heritage considerations, affordability, and the other building projects a church might be focusing on. Phased approaches are expected to address different areas of buildings in phases, to enable manageable funding or fundraising, or to align to other building work or reordering. Also, some parishes are finding they gain confidence in fundraising and project delivery by developing a smaller initial phase before moving on to a more complex phase 2. In this context, I want to note that the Church Demonstrator Project may have inadvertently created the impression that the National Net Zero Programme expects churches to transition to net zero carbon in one step. This is not the case. The Demonstrator Project was seeking to do a very specific thing: establish good exemplar projects around the country which demonstrated that you could get as far as possible to net zero in your context and so inspire others. We were not expecting others to all make that leap at the same rate. Building on this, I just want to reiterate that in the programme's view, a good decarbonisation project delivers for the conservation and heritage needs of the building, the way that the parish used their church and ensuring that it offers a warm and welcoming environment, affordability, both in terms of the initial capital costs but also those long-term running costs, and that reduction in energy use and emission reduction. We also recognise that churches have a variety of priorities at any given moment. For example, they might be fundraising for an organ restoration, and that might be their priority this year. And so their decarbonisation journey might take a bit longer, and that's okay. I'd now like to take you through the financial support which will be available to parishes in 26 to 28 through the National Net Zero Carbon Programme grants. We will have a portfolio of funding available. There will be some grants available for all churches and then targeted funding for specific churches. However, across all programme grants, parishes will need to demonstrate their commitment to progressing net zero carbon to be eligible. This means they need to be registered for EcoChurch, have completed the most recent EFT, and have diocesan support for their application. This will be confirmed by a letter of support. A form for the letter of support will be provided, and this will be consistent across all our grant streams, although a different level of information will be required. So we will make sure this is proportional to the grant size and requirements. First, I'm going to explain the funding that will be accessible for all churches. The numbers listed on this slide are maximum amounts per building per category per triennium, although it should be noted that exclusions might apply. Firstly, for a church with small to medium decarbonisation project, with interventions listed in the Practical Path to Net Zero Carbon for churches, we will be continuing to offer the Quick Wins and Give to Go Green grant programmes. These are both capital grants with dioceses determining which churches should apply and which funding route they should be signposted to. The extension of the 23 to 25 Diocesan Devolved Quick Win Grant Fund has already been communicated, and it will provide funding across 2026 to 28. The approach and eligibility will be unchanged, except that the list of eligible projects is being reviewed to more clearly differentiate between eligible activities which reduce energy demand or support decarbonisation, rather than those that only deliver on building maintenance. The list of eligible projects, however, will be common with the Give to Go Green Grant Fund. The Give to Go Green grant programme will now be national, and you can find out more about this in detail in the fundraising workstream video. I'd also make the point that the Give to Go Green mechanism will now be flexible, and so allow other sources of match funding to be supported through the Give to Go Green mechanism. This means a diocese could choose to distribute their Quick Wins funding locally through the Give to Go Green platform if this aligned with their strategic approach. We will also be continuing the really successful Boiler Hardship Grant programme, but this will be now wrapped into the Decarbonising Churches grant. This is funding available for a parish that has an existing oil or gas or fossil fuel boiler which is at the end of its life or failed or failing. And we want to stop them from being bounced into a like-for-like replacement boiler on financial grounds, which would lock them into a fossil fuel solution for decades to come. For these parishes, we can offer a capital grant of up to £45,000, although partly that is deprivation index linked. We've extended this offer to also offer cash grant for project development. We know sometimes parishes find themselves in this situation and they don't know the right approach for decarbonisation, or they need to undertake further surveys or pay for architects' fees in order to develop the right project for them. And we can offer them a cash grant to support this funding for suppliers and contractors. We can also refer these parishes to the technical advice service, where they can get independent, good quality advice to help them make good decisions about what project to take forward. This grant stream has also been extended for 26 to 28 to also cover parishes who have a current electrified heating solution which has failed or is failing, or one for which running costs are proving to be prohibitive. We want to help these parishes to resolve their heating issues so that they have high quality decarbonised heating solutions which are delivering warmer and affordable churches. And also we want to learn from where these projects have failed in the past. Lastly, we will be continuing for a period into 2026 to 2028 the 3K Energy Audit Grant Fund for those churches or church halls who received a Round 1 energy audit in the triennium 2023 to 25. The grant fund application and eligibility is unchanged, except that over time the grants will be processed via the new grant management platform. I now want to tell you about the targeted funding that will be available for the top 20% of highest carbon emitting churches. We are bringing together in our new Decarbonising Churches grant fund all the central programme church grants under one grant stream. This allows flexibility in allocation, allowing us to respond to churches where they are and where the need is. It also allows us to move a parish application flexibly between the menu of support which will be on offer within this grant fund, responding to where they are at that point in time and what their need is. There are 3 eligibility categories for the Decarbonising Churches grant fund. Firstly, we are targeting funding towards those churches and church halls who are in the top 20% of highest carbon emitting churches and church halls nationally. This is because that top 20% are responsible for 55% of emissions from churches and church halls. To avoid churches dropping in and out of eligibility, if their gross emissions are above the threshold listed here for any year in 2025, 2026, 2027 and 2028, as reported by the EFT, the church will be considered in scope. The threshold number of 14 tonnes of per annum given here may be refined slightly, and it will be confirmed formally at the point of grant launch. It will be based on the gross emissions value, which would put a church or church hall into the top 20% of carbon emitting churches or church halls, calculated from the 67% of churches who reported their 2024 emissions via the EFT. This data is currently undergoing final data cleansing, which might cause this threshold number to vary slightly. The second eligibility criteria is churches who have been previously awarded or invited to apply for church demonstrator grants. This is because we want to continue to support this group of churches on their decarbonisation journey so that they can continue to be an inspiration to parishes and churches within their regions. Lastly, we have a new eligibility category for this grant fund, which is that of strategic diocesan priority. Churches for this category will be identified by diocese rather than through an open call to parishes, and it allows us to support a church plant or a revitalisation church where a building is being refurbished and there are credible growth plans which would make this building a major carbon emitter in the future. So in this way, we will avoid future emissions, and it also allows us to align our net zero carbon programme grant funding to other diocesan priorities. For those churches that meet the eligibility criteria I just outlined, the Decarbonising Churches Grant Fund offers a menu of options of support that is available for them. I'd like to highlight before I go into this in detail that we recognise churches might move through these different stages as they move through different phases of their project. So we are able to offer the different elements of support flexibly, either concurrently or in sequence responding to a parish's need as they develop their decarbonisation journey. For those parishes at the beginning of their net zero carbon journey, we'll offer an enhanced energy audit provided by our nationally procured suppliers. Once they have understood the options available to them in decarbonisation and they're getting ready to do the detailed work and develop that approach into a shovel-ready project, we have on offer a cash grant to support project development. That's up to £15,000 per building per triennium. That £15,000 may not all be awarded in one lump sum. They might need development support with phase 1 of their project in the first year of the triennium, and then come back for an additional development support in the third year of their triennium with the second phase of their project. Both of those could be supported, but only up to that maximum of £15,000 within the triennium. We can also support these churches with in-kind support through referring them to our technical advice panel, which can offer them unbiased and independent support in their decision-making throughout this process. Lastly, we then have projects having actually developed their decarbonisation journey into what we are calling shovel-ready projects. And here we have two types of support. One is fundraising support, where we will give them access to fundraising experts to help them raise the capital needed to get that project delivered in reality. The programme can then offer capital grants to support the delivery of these shovel-ready projects. The amount of capital grant available falls into two different categories. We recognise that most churches will be developing their decarbonisation projects in phases, and therefore for a phased project we offer up to 25% of eligible project costs to a maximum of £50,000. However, we want to encourage those churches that have the capacity and the volunteer expertise and will to fully decarbonise their building in one jump. So for those projects that will take a building all the way to net zero carbon, as far as that is possible in the context of that building, we're able to offer up to 50% of eligible project costs to a maximum of £80,000, which is an increase on the funding that was available in this triennium. We'll also nationally be looking for match funders, and if that is successful, we may be able to offer more funding from those other funders alongside the capital grant awards available from the national programme.
Hi, I'm Laura Donald, the Housing Implementation Manager for the Net Zero Carbon Programme. I've been working with the Diocese and the Pensions Board since 2023 to help understand how best to move our housing stock to net zero and to make some meaningful progress. Survey work helped define the path for our housing to reach net zero and shape the Housing Demonstrator grant stream. Those demonstrators that are already complete are showing some promising results in carbon reductions, with 75% reduction predicted pre-post retrofit and around 94% reduction by 2030 if the grid decarbonises as anticipated. We've been sharing our successes and lessons learnt to date with the Diocese and the Pensions Board, and will continue to do so. The next 12 months will provide vital information on how occupants are engaging with their new technology, the impact on their lives, well-being and energy bills. It is crucial that moving housing towards net zero carbon is seen as part of business as usual for portfolio planning and maintenance activities. Our approach to the forthcoming triennium aims to support this. We will be providing grants to help fund the decarbonisation of some of your clergy homes. We will be providing guidance and support to help you access any third-party grants that may be available, and we will continue to share knowledge and build on the collaboration that we've started in this triennium. I've been told firsthand by many diocesan surveyors the challenges you face in terms of increased costs of day-to-day repairs, maintenance backlogs, and limited budgets. These factors have a real impact on your ability to decarbonise your housing stock. Our grant stream aims to provide financial support for decarbonisation works as part of your business as usual portfolio planning, assisting you to decarbonise properties at vacancy and prior to boiler failure. In Q2 of 2026, grant awards will be made for this grant stream, so you are each aware of the amount you can draw down against. 2026 will also see some significant housing legislation changes. The Renters' Right Act, Decent Home Standards, Minimum Energy Efficiency Standards and EPC reforms. These will no doubt have an impact on your portfolio planning. Given this context and the wish for our funds to be invested in properties that are fit for purpose, drawdowns will only be available from 2027 onwards. We really hope our forward plans will assist you in your move towards net zero, and would like to thank the property teams across the diocese for their engagement in the housing workstream to date. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rory Quinn and I'm the Project Support Officer and current workstream lead for the Net Zero Carbon Schools workstream. The intention of the next few slides is to run you through the Triennium 2 strategy for the workstream, reflecting on what was achieved in workstream 1 and where we're going to look to focus over the next 3 years. The focus for the workstream Triennium 1 was funding heat decarbonisation plans for priority school sites, and during Triennium 1 over 140 heat decarbonisation plans have been commissioned through a network of regional consultants. The other focus for the workstream was on leveraging public sector funding. So this was predominantly in the form of public sector decarbonisation scheme, and the workstream funded feasibility work again on priority sites that had been identified through a data set. This approach was particularly successful. So during the 2 rounds of public sector decarbonisation scheme 3 and 4, the workstream was able to support schools to access over £7 million worth of government grant funding for decarbonisation initiatives in schools. So this might have been this was retrofitting properties, heat pumps, insulation, solar panels, etc. And this grant funding, alongside the SCA match funding, meant that the total value of the decarbonisation projects delivered in public sector decarbonisation scheme 3 and 4 was over £11.5 million. So these projects were really great at both delivering carbon savings in schools in the short term, but also showing a case studies and also a route forward for future decarbonisation work in schools. The approach for Triennium 2 has changed slightly, as the public sector decarbonisation scheme and also the low carbon skills fund, which was another grant fund that was previously available to schools, have both been cancelled. And so how the workstream is going to look to leverage funding has had to alter accordingly. We've also identified through what we've done in Triennium 1 that there's a need for additional training and guidance and real clarity on decarbonisation in schools and what the best routes are for schools to start and continue on this journey. And then the other focus is on really enhancing a data set and using this to inform strategic planning at a national level, but really importantly at diocesan level. And any data we hold centrally will also be made available to dioceses and diocesan boards of education. So the strategic approaches for the next triennium, for the Net Zero Carbon Schools workstream, are as follows. So the first one is going to continue to look at leveraging funding. Because of the way Church of England schools are held and funded by the state, the workstream won't be funding decarbonisation measures in schools, but what we will fund is if a voluntary aided school is looking to secure a capital project, and as part of that capital project there is an element of decarbonisation. For example, if a roof is being replaced, and as part of that replacement the insulation in the roof can be enhanced, then the DBE on behalf of the school will be able to apply to a fund to cover the 10% government liability for that VA school. Our intention is to allow schools to apply for up to £50,000 over the 3 years of the triennium for the government liability on said projects. And to support this, a grants panel will be set up in due course, and our intention is to launch this fund from the second quarter of 2026. The next strategic approach is looking at developing a toolkit, which we've started this triennium, which will guide schools and DBEs on how to initially secure solar on schools. So our intention is to really clarify this space and support DBEs with a resource that they can share with schools, and will show them this is the exact route you need to take in order to install solar panels on your school, through whichever means that is, whether that's through grant funding or some power purchase agreement or some other way. And the intention is that this will be a document that will be a flow chart of decisions, and as a school clicks through it, it will guide them to the relevant agreements they need to be looking at, questions they need to answer. Over time, our intention is to expand this toolkit to other decarbonisation or low carbon technologies, so for example heat pumps, but the focus in the first instance is on solar panels. As part of this approach, we will also be looking to expand an energy monitoring pilot project, which we have started at the end of this year, and we're going to take what we've learned from it to expand into a larger pilot over the next 3 years. The third approach for our strategy moving forward is around green energy procurement and support for community energy opportunities. So we'll be providing guidance on green energy procurement and how DBEs can support their schools if they wish to look at this. And also, once we have guidance from the Department for Education and Treasury around some solar guidelines they're looking to produce, and once we know that schools are able to work with community energy in order to secure solar panels, then DBEs, again on behalf of schools, will be able to apply to the fund I mentioned at the start, the School Decarbonisation Grant Fund, in order to cover the due diligence, feasibility or technical studies on a solar project which involves community energy. So for example, if a school is looking to secure solar panels through working with a community energy group, but a barrier to this is the cost of the feasibility work, for example, then the DBE could apply on behalf of the school to the fund to cover those costs. The slight caveat is that before we launch this, we will need to wait for the guidance from the DFE around solar and solar on schools. The fourth strategic approach is, as I mentioned earlier, a focus on improving the guidance and advice we can share with DBEs in order to support schools on their decarbonisation journey. So we'll be speaking with DBEs, with estate officers and with net zero colleagues to identify what are the gaps in schools' knowledge around how to decarbonise their buildings, and then what's the best form to present this guidance. So it might be in videos or documents, whatever is felt is needed most. So we'll be engaging with colleagues and dioceses in order to decide what guidance is needed and what's the best format for it. The final strategic approach is focused on improving our data set in order to inform strategic planning at a national and a diocesan level. So any data we hold nationally, we currently have a database of display energy certificate data, will be shared with DBEs in use and can be used to inform strategic planning at all levels. So that's our focus over the next triennium. I hope what you'll see from it is that we've listened to what dioceses, what DBEs and what schools and school officers have told us around what schools need in order to continue on their decarbonisation journey. Thank you.